Good morning, everyone. Jeez. Good morning, good morning. So if we go to the next page, what I will do is take us through a summary of what the bell tower team. There has been quite a team working on this between the vestry, the building and grounds committee, and many others in this room. We very much appreciate everyone's help. So in the spring of 2019, we had retained a firm by the name of Building Envelope Specialist to look at the condition of the church building and concluded that this is immediately after, if you all remember, we did the east elevation, the Sermon on the Mount stained glass window. So the same group that helped us do that came forth and looked at the rest of the building and said, what do we need to do? The first thing they identified was the bell tower had significant deterioration, posing a risk of either failure or safety and or property damage, and had a high rating. The other one that they noted was the slate roof, and the slate roof had been there for nearly 100 years, and it has a lifespan of about 80 years, so it had long outlived its life. And then they provided other recommendations they considered less urgent. So going to the next slide, in September, they completed a full assessment of the bell tower and created engineering drawings for its restoration. The deterioration was much greater than expected. And Edmund will take you through the drawings, but essentially the upper third of the tower needed to be completely dismantled and rebuilt. And due to the $1.3 million budget, it's M with a million, we stopped and said we need to consider other alternatives before we commit to such a huge effort. And so it was agreed to wrap the tower. And so if you remember that winter of 2019 into 2020, our tower has this lovely blue-white wrapping around it. So now move forward 2 years, and it's the next slide. What we did is we engaged a local architect. If you recall, Building Envelope Specialists used out-of-state labor, an out-of-state firm to a great extent now, and we were concerned about some of the costs that we were incurring because of transportation and the like. And so we said, let's take a look at a local solution, and we used Corja Capital Projects Group to support that effort, which is a local engineering firm that many of the principals were part of the original MB&A team when they were here years ago. And so a very well-regarded team as well. And we asked them to take a look at it. And they looked at it and we said, let's reconstruct the tower as is, using the same materials. I should mention that when BES and NASO did the work, they did a restoration. And what do I mean by a restoration? They took each block and numbered it, and each block went back exactly where it came from. So if you remember the east elevation work, every stone went back exactly where it came from. That added to the cost of doing that project. These quotes that they've developed are based on more commercial strategy, which is okay. Let's rebuild, but not be as concerned about each stone in each place. So we asked them first, tell us about stone reconstructing in the same way. We then asked them about, is there a better way to do it? Newer materials that may not have the same problems associated with water and seepage. And they suggested basically doing a stone veneer with cement cinder block behind it. And that would make it tighter. And then the last one was, we said, let's think differently about it. And that is a place of worship. What would be another solution that could potentially meet our needs, maintain the architecture, but also be less costly to maintain and to rebuild. And so after looking at several alternatives, they developed this strategy of putting over a new hipped roof over Lady Chapel. Cost estimates ranged from $930,000 to $480,000. So almost double from restoring it the way it is today to using a different strategy or different approach. So going to the next page, we also asked them, tell us about the roof. What do you suggest there? And they gave us 4 different choices that we could think about. Those 4 choices were, we could use asphalt shingle, and that would have a 20-year useful life. We could use a standing seam metal roof, and that would have a 50-year useful life. We could use what's called faux slate or composite slate, so essentially a petroleum-based product. That would also have a 50 years of a life. Or we could replace it with a slate roof, a better slate roof than we had up above, and that would get us to 100 years. The cost ranges from 140 for the asphalt shingle roof to about 270 or double for going with slate. And so going to the next slide, we, the Building and Grounds Committee and the vestry and others are proposing to do a remediation of the tower that is going to be the least costly alternative available. And that's to do the tower removal with a hip roof and then to do asphalt shingle with a total estimated cost of about $620,000. You can go to the next page. So why? Why would you suggest doing a hip roof? Why wouldn't you do something different? Well, there's a challenge with the current tower design. The way it sits next to the existing structure, the cricket that connects the existing roof to the tower, has had a history of failure from its beginning. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from December 21st, 1993's letter to the fellow parishioners from the then Finance and Stewardship Committee of St. Thomas. It said, the recently discovered disastrous leaks in the Lady Chapel roof and the direct threat it imposes to our beloved new organ proves that we cannot give up a substantial reserve for repairs. Today, we have been informed there is substantial water damage on the bell tower, which will result in considerable unforeseen expense. These repairs will have to be carried out immediately if we are to avoid major structural damage to both the tower and the organ. Spring forward nearly 30 years, and as many of you know, water damage again came through that cricket, and the bellows that support the 3rd row of the organ are not working and had to be removed. So we're only working on 2/3 of the capability of the organ. The propensity for freeze-thaw damage to happen in the existing tower. Our structure is patterned after English churches, which have much different weather patterns. The exposure of the stonework and alike to the weather gives opportunity for damage to take place. And then the lower ongoing maintenance costs as a result of improved rainwater and snow shedding provided by a pitched roof, as well as the reduced exposed stonework, led us to the suggestion that this was the most fiscally responsible choice given our limited resources. So moving to the next page, one would ask, why would you do an asphalt roof? And the rationale for that is based on where we are in the new energy or green energy economy. Today, solar panels would not be aesthetically pleasing. We recognize that would diminish the value and the look of this church. But we know that architectural design and the efficiency of those panels are growing at a geometric rate. The southern roof line to my right presents a great exposure to generate solar energy, and using the lowest cost alternative best positions us when the time is right, rather than to incur substantial expense associated with putting a new slate roof in, only to then need to dismantle it at a later time. So, moving to the next slide, what are our next steps? Well, as Reverend Lisa said, the parish needs to consider these alternatives. I am presenting for your initial thought and consideration all of the materials, this presentation, a summary, plus 150 pages of documents are available on the website, in which everyone will have the opportunity to review. You will also have the opportunity to submit questions on the website, and we will respond in kind to assure that everyone gets their opportunity to provide feedback. We will need to go to final architectural and engineering drawings. We will need to get bids attained, and the likelihood of the bids and what had been estimated may be different. The building is a registered historical landmark and will need to be permitted accordingly. We will need to undertake a capital campaign. The hipped roof alternative will require, or will only be able to maintain, a bell or two. And so the carillon, we will either need to determine whether we want to retain it, and if we want to retain it, we may need to move it to another structure somewhere else on the grounds. The Methodist Church, for instance, over by Paws, has a carillon or bells that are separate from the building. So if we wanted to retain it, we could do that. And then lastly, construction contracts would need to be executed, and we believe that we can target the spring or summer of 2023 to begin construction. Right now, with what is going on in the world with the pandemic, and the ability to get good construction people in place, costs are very high. We should defer for a year, and we will give us that will give us time to plan. So with that, Edmund's going to take you through what we're proposing more pictorially than I did in words.
I brought this walking stick just so I could point at things, and I may not need to, but at any rate, here we have the architect's rendering of what this church looks like, and later we'll have an attempt from the new architect to give you the same perspective. As I've studied this picture, I realized there's no way you could ever get this perspective in person, because you'd have to be standing in kind of the middle of the rectory. And then I'm not sure, but the architect who drew this tricks us a little, and it shows us part of the flower room around the back side of the tower that I don't think you could see if you were standing from here. But at any rate, that is what we're starting with. So next picture. Okay. So what we're going to be talking about for the tower and the chapel is just this part in blue. The roofs, of course, are separate, but okay, next one. So as Carlos had said, the upper third has to be taken apart completely and then either rebuild or something else done. This part needs to be repointed at least, all the cement dug out of the seams and new cement put in. And the same there, but then there are other areas that need rebuilding. We know from having this east wall done that although BES was good at ascertaining what the problems were, when the masons got there, they found, well, some bits needed more reworking and some bits needed a little less. But we do know that that window has, whenever it rains, water pours right out of the masonry above the window. So there's a lot. So at any rate, when we saw this is one of the reasons we thought, well, can we do something else? If we have to take it down, maybe we can, what we put back could be better. Okay, next. So here are some just elevation drawings of the existing tower. I don't think we had anything more to say about those. Okay. Right. And then here's a view that most of us, well, I don't know. If you walk out of the doors over there, you do see the little courtyard and you get a good view of the back of the flower room. But if you look up a little, you then do see that there are two different valleys in copper that have now been covered with rubber and at different angles, and both there and around the cricket are places where ice and snow build up in the winter, contributing to seepage into the masonry. So here are some elevations of what we propose to do, showing you where the tower would be and what the new roof lines would look like. And in this louvered area, we believe there will be found space to put a bell or two. These plans are all preliminary to help us decide what we want the church to look like. As we go forward, once we've decided on one direction, there will be a lot more drawing, architectural drawing and construction drawing, and there will be more decisions to make. Exactly how high is the roof, the eave line in relation to the church. But at any rate, this is to give you a general idea. And here is the third view of that, our proposed change from the courtyard side. Okay, next. I'm not sure exactly why, because we have the original drawing, but this maybe was our architect trying to point out that to show that you have to squish the tower narrow. So this is what it looks like with a computer generated or drawing, I suppose. And here's what it would look like, or something what it somewhat look like with the new roof system on and having taken down the bell tower part of the chapel. Now, to those of us, or to at least to me, someone who's been a carpenter and a boat builder for a long time, this seems a lot cleaner and able to shed snow and water, preserves the inside of the chapel. And if something needs repair, repairing an asphalt roof is pretty easy. All right. Oh, that was it. So I know it may be a big decision, and it was a short presentation, but that's a condensation of the last 2.5 or 3 years of our thinking about this. And granted, the pandemic slowed us down a lot getting going and having meetings. But we think we found a very agreeable architect who takes our suggestions and doesn't seem to try to tell us what is the best thing until we ask him what he thinks. So are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Will you be consulting with will the architect be consulting with like David Wallace Organ Company or somebody to have an adequate?
Yes, because I know the organ is right here, and there's more organ on above the flower room, and those roofs would incorporate those things. But yes, certainly the organ people and the Verdun Bell Company, who calls me once a year to ask me, how's the project going? Yes, we'd certainly do that. All right, so if you have other questions, email them to somebody else. Well, I think the church website, I suppose, will have a place. Or the communications officer of the St. Thomas. Oh, there's a new part of the website that's Bell Tower Update. Oh, okay, she's got a microphone now.
There's a new webpage called Bell Tower Update. It has, this isn't, I have to go there. St. Thomas, you should say, all the way up. Bell Tower Update. That just came up live this morning. So you can see that it has the presentation that Carlos and Edmund just did. It has a summary, just a 4-page summary. And those two, we couldn't get it all in one. So there's like 70 pages and 80 pages of that's made all the reports with all the pictures. And then the bottom one, if you open that, Carlos, if you have a question or a comment, you just put your name, your email address. If you want a response, you're gonna have to put your email address on. That'll come to me, communications at St. Thomas, and I'll pass it to Edmund and Carlos to review. But I think if it all comes to one email address, we can make sure that it's responded to, rather than contacting Lisa or contacting admin. If it comes to the communications address, we'll make sure it gets to Edmund and Carlos for response. So, and anything that comes up going forward will be added to this website. So you can easily get it from the top of the page, I think. Yes, it worked.
No. Edmund, I realize, again, you're trying to make sure everybody in the congregation understands ramifications, but did you say initially that the vestry has made a recommendation?
I may not have what Carlos did, but yes, the Building and Grounds Committee did recommend to the vestry, and the vestry talked it over and found we got more information. And the vestry has, by a strong majority vote, recommends that the congregation listen to the vestry and do what we tell them.
I mean, you're looking for input, obviously, everybody at church should have input.
Well, I wanted to say that without being on the mic. What was it? Say you had another question you were asking.
The reason for this meeting, which is good, is for everybody in the church to have an opportunity to review this. I just want to make sure that the congregation knows the vestry has looked at this for quite some time. They have made a recommendation. So it's now the congregation to get back and say, we think you ought to consider something else from what the vestry is recommending.
Right. So this is the chance for the congregation to weigh in, and if they don't support what the vestry has done, the vestry would go back to work, and I'm not sure what we would do next. We might just try to convince you that this is right, but
The investor is interested in getting.
but we're right, we're interested in getting input, and we hope that we have a great majority of the congregation supporting what we are suggesting, which we understand is a big change in the look of the church. But as Carlos pointed out, we think it's a responsible and sustainable way forward for this building and for those that have to keep it up in the future. And yet it still retains all the aspects of the chapel, although maybe the ceiling changes a little. It will mean the removal of the bells above. So that is a change, but let's hope we can, now that we've learned how to pivot, we can pivot. Yes, ma'am.
Will since this is on the register of places, will they have any, do you think that they will object to changing the whole character of the church?
No, it's a town ordinance, and we're in a historic district. It does mean that the permitting process takes longer, but it does not give the town the ability to tell us what we can and cannot do. It asks us questions, and it makes us recycle some things that if you were in another part of town, you could just tear it down and take it to the dump. And I think there are some other rules or procedures that you have to follow. I did ask the code enforcement officer a few months ago, and she did email me the long list of what you have to do and not do. But as I say, it doesn't prevent you from making a change. It makes you take a longer time.
What if the congregation raises more money than the 600 in plan? What if they raise substantially more money? What are the chances of restoring a little bit more?
Well, if that does happen, I suppose we would come back together and then ask that question. We could also, as it was mentioned in the BES report, there are other parts of this building that need work also. The chimney over here on this side, that ventilator of that stained glass window is broken. I've just been talking to a stained glass studio that does repair of church and university and whoever stained glass windows. And as they point out, they also have about 100-year lifespan because the lead slowly oxidizes and changes molecular structure so that it begins to fail and you can't just patch it. So if we raised a lot more money, we could redo all these windows. Right, well, if people wanted to donate to the tower and came to us, we would say, okay, and we'd have to discuss it. I think there would be some things that we would still want to fix. The cricket that has been a problem, or maybe, depends how much money, maybe we take that tower down and put one over the entry so we can get the tower and the organ separated from each other. So if there's a leak, the organ won't get hurt. And you could have the bells over there. I mean, there's a lot of choices. If, somebody gave us $5 or $6 million, we could go to town. Oh, okay. Sorry if I'm flippant, but I've been doing this for 3 years. Any other questions? Barbara. Thank you. So are we done? Yeah, I guess we're done. So this is an ongoing conversation. So for a couple of weeks, we would like to have questions? And then we'll decide whether we come back again or. And if you support it, maybe supportive emails would be good too. All right, thanks, everybody.